Welcome back to Face the Nation. Time now for our all-star political panel. April Ryan, the White House correspondent for American Urban Radio Network. She's the author of The Presidency in Black and White. Dana Milbank, columnist for the Washington Post. And we want to welcome David Katniss to Face the Nation. He is the senior politics writer for U.S. News and World Report. Plus, we're joined by our own congressional correspondent, Nancy Cordes, and our political director, who has a great future, I think, John Dickerson. Well, it was all Republicans all the time. Up in New Hampshire this weekend, Hillary Clinton was out in Iowa, but she turned out to be topic A amongst all the Republicans. Here's just a sample.
As I was coming up, I was a little bit startled because I could have sworn I saw Hillary's Scooby-Doo van outside. Well, and then I realized it couldn't possibly be that, because I'm pretty sure y'all don't have any foreign nations paying speakers, right?
This listening tour is something out of North Korea. Would you like to meet the dear leader and ask him anything you would like? How did she get away with this? I don't know. So if you're looking for something new, don't look to her. Look to the 35 people running for president on the Republican side.
Well, John Dickerson, you were out there. I was out there this week while Hillary Clinton was driving around in that little van out there in Iowa.
You couldn't even get all the Republican people running in a van. You'd need to rent like one of those airport shuttle buses or something. There's so many of them. One thing that was interesting about the Republicans is there's so many of them, but there was no favorite. There's nobody, maybe Chris Christie's doing this, but who's stacking all their chips on New Hampshire the way they have in the past. So it's a freewheeling open contest. And what's interesting is you see the different way voters are trying to categorize these folks. So on the one hand, they love a speaker like Ted Cruz because he's pure. He just speaks the old-time religion. But then Frank Luntz did a focus group with all the activists one morning on Saturday morning. And he said, raise your hand if you want a senator in the White House. About 3 to 5 did. Raise your hand if you want a governor. The entire room raised their hands. So they love a senator's rhetoric, but do they want the executive experience of a governor in the office? They're all figuring all that stuff out. Good thing they have 10 months to do it.
David, you have been tracking Ted Cruz, among other things, and while they may not want a senator, he has to be taken seriously, I think. And I didn't believe that at the beginning of this, but he raised $4 million the week after he announced his campaign. He's now raised about $30 million. Is he a serious candidate?
He has to be taken seriously, and the Cruz campaign told me that since the end of that first quarter, they've already raised an additional $1 million, so they believe they are in the top tier. Look, most Republicans, you talk to them, they don't believe Ted Cruz will ultimately be the nominee. But with a guy that has that type of money, and he's also establishing the organization, and if you look at the polls, he did get a boomlet in Iowa and New Hampshire, and his campaign has said it has held. That, you know, he's right now second place in New Hampshire. Now, will it hold in the ensuing months? That's too soon to tell. But right now, you'd have to probably bump Ted Cruz up into that top tier, at least for the time being.
You, Nancy, were out in Iowa watching Hillary Clinton. You got to say, it's a very unusual way to start a campaign here. I mean, she hasn't had a news conference
And
yet.
she's a very unusual candidate who doesn't necessarily need as much attention because she isn't in the airport shuttle. She's all by herself in the van. She probably wouldn't mind getting less attention rather than more. The question that a lot of us had who were out on the trail this week was, is this what the entire campaign is going to look like, where she's kept at a distance from us, or was this just the first week, the rollout, where they didn't want it marred by questions about Benghazi or emails, and is she going to open up as time goes on? We just don't know.
Well, the question I asked Joe Manchin, and I'd like to get your take on this, Dana, and also you, April. I mean, why is it that a party that's won the last 2 elections, some would even say they won the last 3, because a lot of Democrats still think that Al Gore won that election. Why is it that party comes up with one candidate?
I think it's extraordinary, Bob. And if you look at O'Malley, I mean, he in that interview, he was hardly challenging Hillary at all. And I think if he's just going to sit there and say, I did a good job as mayor of Baltimore and I was a good governor, I mean, he has as much chance of landing on the White House as if he's, you know, going in there in a gyrocopter. It's just not going to happen unless he takes her on more forcefully. There is potentially a huge populist opening here for somebody. Nobody's taking that Elizabeth Warren position, and I think it's extraordinary. They may not beat Hillary, but there's a real opportunity here, and I know you're going to have some free time after the summer. So
If nominated, I will not.
But Bob, you know, there is a thing called the Clinton machine, and some of the Republicans have made mention of it. Huckabee even made mention of it. But there is such a thing called the Clinton machine. I'm telling you, many of the Democrats are jumping on her bandwagon. I was talking all this week. They're saying, look, I'm telling you this now, but I'm going to go. I'm secretly right now. I'm going to go for Hillary, and she's got everyone. I mean, you've got Erskine Bowles, the former chief of staff of Bill Clinton, who said he's going to do everything in his power to get her to the presidency, to the Oval Office. So you have to remember that Hillary Clinton is a part of that machine, the Bill Clinton machine, but the Clinton folks are trying to figure out what works. And Martin O'Malley really is not a problem to them right now, or there's really no other rock star that's out there right now.
Although it's interesting, I ran into a lot of people, Democrats in Iowa, who were intrigued by Martin O'Malley and who had gone out to see him speak. And you know, you got to remember, Iowa is a caucus state, and a caucus involves getting into a room and talking about your choices. Well, if there aren't any choices, a caucus isn't a lot of fun. So they want more people in the race, even if they support Hillary Clinton. I talked to one guy who was in her announcement video who says, I've been a supporter of hers since 5th grade, but I want Martin O'Malley to run. So I think there is that hunger out there.
But doesn't she share a problem with Jeb Bush? You know, I interviewed George W. Bush a month or so ago, and I said, what do you think your brother's main problem is? What's his main challenge? And he said, me. He said he has got to make the campaign about him, not about me. And that's why you're not going to see him make any big speeches out on the campaign trail, because he himself says the minute I make a speech, then it's about me again. And he's got to keep them looking forward, not backward. Doesn't she have to do exactly the same thing? Keep people from looking in the rear view mirror and keep them focused out front. Can she do that?
Well, I think that's why you had that Jeb Bush boomlet when everybody said, wow, he's really going to be the 800-pound gorilla, and it didn't happen. It's not. There's only one tier in the Republican race now, and nobody's really broken out. And part of Jeb's problem was because who's going to run against Hillary? Well, you do need a fresh face there, and Hillary, of course, faces that same problem. The answer for that, though, is to get out there and talk to people. It's not to sit in your Scooby-Doo van being chased by the media down a lawn in Iowa and refuse to get out there. I think Democrats should want somebody in there challenging her. I think you see the Scooby-Doo van if you're a Democrat and you say, ruh-roh.
Well, but this was that was very well.
Oh my gosh.
This was only the first week. And I gotta say, I think Hillary Clinton did what she had to do, frankly. Whatever she did, the Republicans weren't gonna like. But she went out, yes, some of this stuff was orchestrated. She went out and she laid some concerns among Democrats, some former Obama supporters, that you're gonna have a voice in this Iowa campaign. She met privately and said, look, you're gonna be able to play the music at the rallies. You're going to pick what we do. That's not how it was. And I talked to a Democrat out there who said, are we going to be dictated by some New York consultant? And she reassured him, she said, no. This is going to be an Iowa campaign. That's different from last time. And this is only the first week. Now, eventually, she's going to have those impromptu moments. She's going to have to get in the scrum with reporters like all these Republicans did in Iowa or in New Hampshire this weekend and take tough questions. That has to happen. But really, this is only the first week. So
I think
we have
you
to
can't.
cut her some slack on
You
the
absolutely
rollout.
cannot overstate that. I mean, I completely agree with you.
And the Clinton folks are saying, they said, you know, we're going at it learning. It was the first week. And this week, we're going to see her at a construction site. We're going to see her at a community college. And they're trying to figure out really what works. And beyond the Scooby-Doo van, the $60,000 Scooby-Doo van, you know, there are efforts to try to retweak it, to keep the momentum going, even if Martin O'Malley or whomever else on the Democratic side decides to jump in. And even though the Republicans are still pointing at the Scooby-Doo van and talking about her.
Hillary Clinton is never going to, no matter how many vans she gets in or fast food restaurants
about
she
the
stops
vans.
at,
It's
she's
all about
never
the
going to
vans.
look like a regular person who goes through all the abrasions of daily life. That's not going to happen. Where her strength is, and it came through even behind the bulletproof glass of these staged events, was that she's been thinking about these issues of family and wages and health care her entire life. So when she refers to a scholarship she set up when she was First Lady of Arkansas, she has some facility with the issue. So she's not going to be able to tell somebody, look, I know what it's like to change diapers, because it just isn't going to seem authentic. But she can say, hey, when I was thinking about these issues that you care about now for 30 years, that's where her stronger...
But she's changing her grandchild's diapers right now, so she can say that.
She can say it, but it's not going to make people think she's just like us.
I think the problem still goes back to this. And I mean, anybody who saw that hilarious Saturday Night Live skit where she's practicing making her opening video, and guess who keeps showing up looking over her shoulder? But hey, don't forget.
Nowhere to be seen this week, by the way.
Is that good for her or bad for her, Nancy?
You know, I think it will be good for her in certain places and at certain times. It's not good for her right now while she's trying to establish that she's the candidate, one and only front and center. But there are going to be times when he can come out and be more comfortable with the press than she can. And so he can kind of create that image of openness that she's striving to achieve, but she can, you know, she can avoid us.
Let's take a quick break. We'll come right back with a lot more of all of this. Well, we're back now, and I want to go back and just play you something that Jeb Bush said up in New Hampshire at a breakfast up there when he got to the subject of, is he going to be his own man? And here's how he put it.
Everybody knows me as George's boy, Barbara's boy, W's brother. I have some other family members, but if I'm going to go beyond the consideration of running for the highest office in the land, I need to share my heart to show a little bit about my life experience. For those that have family members, I think you can appreciate this. We're not always like our brother or sister or mom and dad. We all have our own unique DNA and our own life experiences.
So he obviously knows that's what he's got to do, but how does he do that, David?
I think the ironic thing is that if Jeb Bush was named Jeb Johnson, and a successful two-term governor from Florida, he might be in a better position in the Republican Party right now, other than the money. What the Bush name brings him is the money and the connections. But I think that the W stuff, he can't get around it. It is going to follow him everywhere, just like, frankly, the Clinton, you know, her husband and what he did is going to follow Hillary. I don't think he's going to be able to do it. And I think that's why you're seeing in some of these pollings his favorability, you know, it's under 50% in some of these early primary states. That's a problem for the presumed early frontrunner.
He's also making really no effort, I think, to get away from his brother in particular. You hear him out there using the word evildoers, and we're all, you know, having PTSD flashbacks to 2001. You know, so where is Jeb different from George W. on policy? I don't think we've seen it yet. And you're right, it's a parallel concern for Hillary. Where is she going to be different from where her husband was? You know, she was asked, or her campaign was asked about trade this week. Huge fight between Obama and the Democratic base. She just completely punted, said she's not getting involved.
Or was she going to be different from Barack Obama, not just her husband? I think Jeb Bush has a model for how to do this. When he ran for governor in Florida, everybody said the same thing, you're just another Bush, so they called him Jeb. You know, got rid of the last name. But he also said, I went to 200 schools. I went and hustled and spent the time in the schools and showed that I cared about the issue. In other words, he didn't talk about how he wasn't George's brother. He showed that he was his own person. Right now he's spending a lot of time raising money, but they hope they'll have this opportunity to do a similar thing. Show who he actually is. Now that's hard to do in today's news cycle, but that's his real challenge, is to actually show who he is, and they hope that the caricature, which has these numbers pretty bad for him right now, people will say, oh, I thought he was something else. Now he's this other thing, and that's potentially intriguing. It's very funny. It sounds very much like what you hear from supporters of Hillary Clinton for their model of introducing a new person that's hard to introduce as new because everybody knows her.
Nancy, do you think this email business is going to prove to be important in this campaign?
I think that congressional Republicans will make sure to keep it at the forefront throughout her campaign. It's no accident that the House Benghazi Committee said, we want to make sure we hear from you by May 1st, because they knew she was going to roll out her campaign in April. And so they said, like, let's dog the campaign announcement with more about Benghazi and the emails. And I think that that is going to kind of dribble along, and it's part of the reason that I think they are afraid for her to take questions, because they're worried that all the questions are going to be about emails and not about her vision for the future.
And what about all this foreign money? There's no question that a lot of money poured into the Clinton Foundation. And I guess they've said now, what's the latest now? They've said they're going to limit that from here on in.
Yeah, they've limited the amount, and she's no longer on the board, so she's pulled away from that a bit. She's separated from it a bit.
But aren't the Republicans going to say, well, but you ought to give it back, what you've already got?
Sure they
Of course they're going to do that, and they're going to say you should release your server to get the emails off. And that's going to be in the background here, I think, throughout. But the problem for the Republicans is they can't run a general election campaign right now. I went to the Nationals game this week, and the RNC is giving out Defeat Hillary beer koozies. That's all well and good, but we have, as Lindsey Graham said, 35 people running for the Republican presidential nomination. They seem to think the way to do this is to each be more shrill than the other in lambasting Hillary Clinton, to the point where you have Donald Trump retweeting a vulgar tweet about Hillary Clinton. That's not going to, I think, win any of them the nomination. They've got to differentiate themselves other than in how they can be the most anti-Hillary.
But yes, Hillary Clinton does have some issues. She has several albatrosses hanging around her neck, but at the same time, the Republicans are using this against their advantage, for their advantage. But when is it that they're going to start internalizing, saying, we got to point against each other, look at each other and point at each other? Because once they start pointing at one another, the fractures within that party will start showing. And whether it be Jeb, I'm sorry, I'm pointing at W.
Well, hey, that's the problem.
And there you go.
Whether it be God, I'm doing a D, Jeb or Cruz or whomever else, Huckabee, whoever else. I mean, once they start looking inward, they're going to show all the fractions, and Hillary is going to rise even with the hearings. There's going to be a back and forth, who's got the momentum, who's got the momentum here, who's got the momentum there. But the issue is, when will the fingers stop pointing at Hillary and go inward into their own party?
One of the interesting things, I mean, we are now in the age of anything goes. There's nothing over the top anymore. And one of the more interesting comments made by Huckabee this week, he told, a radio station out in Iowa, I think it was, that people whose children were thinking about going into the U.S. military, they might be wise to kind of put that off until you have another commander-in-chief, because the current one is not very nice to Christians.
Well, that's going to get him a headline. And
it got him a headline.
It's going to get him a headline, and it looks like he is getting closer to being closer to announcing to the announcement of actually running. I think we're going to have 2 or 3 more announcements in May. But, again, there's only so much piece of the pie. I mean, with these guys on the Republican side that can throw the red meat. I mean, Ted Cruz is just as good rhetorically. You've got Ben Carson, who is also going to probably looks like he's getting into the ring. And I think eventually what's going to happen is, you're right, the Republicans have been pretty good in New Hampshire. They haven't pointed the arrows at each other yet. That is coming, but I think the ultimate argument in the Republican Party is going to be, who can beat Hillary? That's why you're hearing all the Hillary comments now. It's going to be electability. Who can beat her?
It's true, but because they're all trying to compete to beat her, and there's not so much distinguishing free running room, what they're going to do, and this happened with the Democrats in 2008, is they're going to get into a competition on policy. You see Chris Christie trying to wake everybody up by saying, I've got ideas about entitlements and Social Security, purely because you can only do so much to beat the other guy out in the beating up of Hillary. You just can't be that clever.
One thing, and we haven't talked about him, Marco Rubio. I mean, doesn't he also have a little problem here? And, I asked him about it. If you looked at his profile, it's very similar to that of Barack Obama. And a lot of people thought Barack Obama didn't work out too well. Doesn't he have to prove to his party that he's not Barack Obama?
He's got to prove to his party he's not Barack Obama. Even though he's still someone considered still a novice on the Hill, he's got to show that he has the potential to be an executive. He can sit there at the highest heights and make the decisions. But the problem for him is he's so far right that when it comes, because he's focusing in mainly on things for the primary, but when it comes to the general election, he's got the immigration piece, but all the other stuff, he's very far right, and I don't think he's going to be able to pull the masses of the Republican Party together like he wants to.
And I think that's why Rubio is polling in the high single digits. And each one of them has trouble breaking through a dozen 15 points here. So normally you would expect some to drop out and others to gain those followers. But somebody like Rubio can raise $40 million and stay in this race as long as he wants, as can all of these other guys. And you can't see how the race consolidates here, and that does leave a huge opening for you, Bob, if you choose to seek the nomination this summer.
John, if you had to and this would be nothing but a horseback guess, who do you think is going to still be around when we get to the New Hampshire primary, which is, after all, 10 months away?
You know, Bob, I think a lot of them are going to be around because in the old days they'd get winnowed because they'd run out of money, or people would think you're kind of off to the side, you're kind of a loser. Now you have the money because of the super PACs that can operate around you, and also being an honest man in a process that is against you is a great way to get on talk radio, to get your own TV shows, and to build your own following for whatever you may want to do in the future. So I think a lot of these candidates, separate and apart from, these are all real candidates. They have held real jobs, governors, senators, they can hold a room. I think you're going to have a lot of people around, which means to win, you might see a pretty small percentage as a winning percentage in the.
Well, you know, we have to end it right there. But once again, I've always said every campaign is different. And certainly this one is going to be different than any that I can remember. So thanks to all of you, and we'll be back. We're going to have a look back at the Oklahoma City bombing in a Face the Nation flashback. Today we mark a somber anniversary, 20 years since the Oklahoma City bombing, one of the worst terrorist attacks our country has ever seen. As a nation, we were just coming to learn about terrorism from abroad. On the heels of the first World Trade Center attack 2 years earlier, many of us immediately assumed foreign terrorists were behind this bombing. But within days, eyewitnesses led investigators to, of all people, U.S. Army veterans Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols. That weekend, then White House Chief of Staff Leon Panetta appeared on Face the Nation.
There is nothing, there is absolutely nothing, real or imaginary, that in any way justifies the killing of defenseless children. These people are not patriots, they're cowards. They're not heroes, they're criminals.
When the final death toll came in 2 weeks later, 168 people were dead, including 19 children. Nichols was convicted on all counts and is currently serving life without parole. McVeigh was sentenced to death and executed in 2001, 3 months before 9/11. Back in a minute. Well, that's it for us today. Before we go today, I want to thank someone who's been the artistic talent behind the scenes here at Face the Nation. Deborah Hasselmark is responsible for the graphics and the look of the show, and she'll be leaving us in CBS to start a new chapter in her life. We want to wish her all the best. Good luck, Deb. We are going to miss you. The rest of us will be here next week, so we'll see you then.